They didn't see a threat. They saw a female combat medic alone, outnumbered, and kneeling in the center of a military training ring. 147 Navy SEALs watched, waiting for her to fail. But what they didn't know, she wasn't there to ask for respect. She was there to earn it in blood, precision, and 7 unforgettable seconds. This is not just a story about women in combat. It's about rewriting what strength really looks like. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from all corners of the world. Let's get started. They said it was just a training exercise, a protocol demonstration, a controlled drill for combat medics under simulated threat conditions. But everyone standing on that tarmac at 600 hours knew better. This wasn't about showcasing tactics. This was a trial, a reckoning. And the woman in the middle, she wasn't supposed to survive it. At least, that's what 147 Navy SEALs thought as the sun climbed over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the asphalt. They saw a 5'7" woman with auburn hair and a regulation bun, standing alone with a medic's kit on her hip and calm in her eyes. They saw someone to doubt. But they didn't see the story behind her eyes. To understand what happened that morning, you have to go back 4 years and 7,000 miles to the blistering edge of a forgotten war in western Iraq, to a canvas field tent held together by sandbags and desperation. That's where Captain Amelia Cross first learned the difference between surviving and prevailing, where she earned a call sign whispered with both awe and warning requiem, and where she made a choice that saved a man's life but cost him his legs. That choice would follow her all the way here. It started with a whistle. Sharp, piercing, final. Captain Amelia Cross knelt on the concrete inside the painted circle 20 feet wide, surrounded by a silent wall of uniformed men. 147 Navy SEALs stood in concentric formation like Colosseum spectators. Some were curious, most were skeptical, a few were waiting for blood. They'd heard rumors, a female combat medic, 3 deployments, decorations that looked good on paper, but paper didn't sweat, paper didn't bleed, and in their eyes, neither had she. That was about to change. Across from her stood senior operator Mason Tate and trainee Kyle Mercer, 2 SEALs built like linebackers. Tate, 6'3", 230 pounds, scars on his knuckles and a chip on his shoulder. Mercer, younger, faster, still with something to prove. Only Amelia wasn't the one who needed proving. She had removed her captain's bars minutes earlier, pressed them into the Master Chief's palm like a quiet declaration. Rank doesn't matter here. Only skill does. The final scenario was simple in name, brutal in practice, simultaneous 2-man threat while rendering aid to a casualty. The goal wasn't victory, it was survival. And they knew she wouldn't walk away unscathed. At least, they hoped. The moment froze, brittle with silence. Then Mason sat it, just loud enough for her in the front row to hear kneel before me. A few chuckles rippled behind him, not many, even among warriors. Some lines land heavy. Amelia didn't respond. She kept her eyes on the imaginary patient in front of her, fingers hovering like she was already stitching flesh, mind already half inside a body torn open by shrapnel. That was her first lesson. Let them underestimate you, then teach them why they shouldn't. Mason and Kyle struck simultaneously. One came for her ribs, the other for her legs. 147 SEALs had seen 1,000 fights, but not like this. Mason's boot connected first, crashing into her side with enough force to knock the wind from her lungs. A fraction of a second later, Kyle's shin slammed into her hip, and the combined force hurled her sideways like a rag doll. Concrete met her shoulder, then her ribs, then her face. Blood, just a trickle from her lip, but enough. The circle went silent. Even the wind seemed to still, as if the world was holding its breath. Amelia didn't move. Not for 3 seconds, maybe 4. She cataloged the damage like a surgeon scanning x-rays, ribs bruised, not broken, hip throbbing, but stable, head intact, chin tucked just in time, Blood tasted iron, still breathing. She was hurt, but she wasn't finished. The men who kicked her, they were grinning. Tate offered a mock apology. Oops, reflex. Kyle laughed, bouncing on his toes. But they didn't see her right hand press flat to the ground, didn't see the slow, deliberate rise of her body as she pushed off one trembling knee, didn't see the shift in her eyes, the fire behind the pain. She stood, and the temperature dropped. Metaphorically, maybe, but every man in that circle felt it. A chill like combat, that eerie calm before everything explodes. Amelia wiped the blood from her lip, glanced at the crowd, and said only this. You just activated live response protocol. This is no longer a demonstration. Then she turned, walked to the Master Chief, and handed over her rank insignia. Again. Louder this time, I am not an officer in this ring. I am a combatant. No one spoke. Not even the Master Chief, who'd trained killers for 3 decades, could hide the flicker of recognition in his eyes. This woman wasn't breaking. She was becoming... Back in the ring, Amelia squared her stance, boots planted, hands loose. Every line of her body screamed readiness. And in the crowd, something unexpected happened. Men hardened, skeptical, ready to dismiss her, leaned forward. Not to mock, but to watch. Something had shifted. Not just in the fight, but in the story. The medic they thought would fall had stood back up. And what came next would shatter more than just bones. It would shatter every assumption they had about who belonged here. They thought she'd stay down. They expected tears, maybe an apology, something they could hold on to justify what they'd done. But Amelia Cross stood. Not just stood, Rose. Her spine straightened like a drawn blade. Her shoulders rolled back into place with the precision of someone who'd spent 8 years learning to ignore pain. She didn't wince, didn't blink. She simply reset, and in that moment, she wasn't the woman they'd kicked. She was something else, and that something terrified them. The Master Chief saw it first, a flicker in his eyes. He nodded, barely, like a coach who taught a student everything they needed and was now watching the final exam unfold. Amelia turned toward her attackers. Kyle Mercer had been smirking moments ago, cocky in the way only the young and untested can be. That smirk was gone, replaced with something that looked a lot like doubt. Mason Tate, however, hadn't moved, arms crossed, stone-faced, but the way his weight shifted just slightly back on his heels, that was the tell. He'd seen something in her eyes that made him question the script he'd written for her. "You forced this," she said. Her voice was ice. "Now you live with the consequences." The Master Chief's voice boomed from the sideline. "Captain Cross. Full defensive response authorized. Medical team on standby." Amelia nodded, then dropped into a crouch like a coil tightening. This time, they came faster. Kyle first, lunging for her shoulder in an aggressive tackle, pure momentum, no strategy. Rookie move. Amelia used his speed against him. She stepped aside, caught his wrist mid-lunge, pivoted, and sent his body spinning sideways in a blur of limbs and panic. He hit the ground hard. Shoulder first. A crack echoed across the ring, his fibula giving way as he landed. He screamed, and the ring went silent. Again, one down. Mason growled and came in fast, no hesitation. A professional's charge, controlled, centered, explosive. But Amelia didn't run. She didn't block. She stepped into him. Into the threat. They collided like storm fronts, his mass, her precision. His arm reached. Her hand snapped to his wrist. Her other arm slammed into his knee, 15 pounds of lateral force, perfectly timed as all 230 of his pounds came crashing down. The knee gave. The scream was instant. And then, stillness. 2 seals, one with a shattered fibula, the other with a ruptured MCL and cracked tibial plateau, both of them on the ground, both moaning, both broken. 147 witnesses stood frozen. No one moved. Amelia was panting now, blood on her chin, hairline damp with sweat, but her hands were steady, her body still ready, her voice calm as ever. "Medic," she called out. "Left leg spiral fracture, right knee ligament rupture, pulse is compromised, time sensitive." The response team sprinted forward. She dropped beside Kyle Mercer first. His face was ghost white, eyes wide, tears threatening. He wasn't crying from pain. He was crying because reality had just collided with ego. Amelia worked fast, professional, efficient. Her tone had shifted again from warrior to healer, from fury to focus. "You're going to be okay," she told him, "but you're never going to forget this. And that's the point." She moved to Mason next. He tried to pull away, but pain locked him in place. She didn't flinch, just leaned in close enough for only him to hear. "I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. And now, you learn." He didn't reply, but his eyes, wild just seconds ago, were full of something else now. Recognition. She wasn't a medic who'd gotten lucky. She wasn't a woman who got angry. She was a weapon forged in battlefield silence and refined by years of restraint. And restraint was the only thing that kept him from a wheelchair today. Behind her, the ring had gone from stunned to something else, stillness with weight. SEALs who'd mocked her now watched like students. Men who measured strength in bruises now questioning how they'd ever overlooked this kind of power. Amelia stood, looked at the circle of faces, and for the first time they didn't see a woman. They saw a warrior and 147 men who'd come expecting a show, and stood in silence. They didn't speak to her after it was over. Not right away. The medics hauled Kyle and Mason out of the ring on stretchers, both groaning, both stunned in ways that went far deeper than the breaks in their bodies. The blood had barely dried before the ring began to dissolve. Quiet groups formed, conversations sparked, but no one came near her. She wasn't one of them. Not yet. She was something they didn't have words for. Captain Amelia Cross stood alone in the middle of the compound, shoulders drawn back, blood drying on her cheek, her rank insignia still in the Master Chief's hand. She didn't ask for it back. Not yet. She just waited. Waited as the whispers grew into something else weight. The kind that shifts the air in a room, the kind that changes people before they realize they've changed. Then a voice cut through the murmurs. Not loud, just clear. "She saved my life." Everyone turned. A wheelchair rolled through the gathering. Older SEALs recognized him instantly. Noah Jennings, once the most promising sniper in their unit, now retired, paralyzed from the waist down. A living legend who hadn't been seen on base in 3 years. But Amelia knew him by another name. The man whose spinal cord she'd held between her fingers under gunfire. The man whose brother just tried to break her in front of 147 witnesses. Noah stopped just outside the ring. His voice wasn't loud, but somehow it carried further than any shout. "She saved my life in Fallujah, under fire, no backup. My spine was in pieces, and she didn't flinch." He looked around. "I've had 3 more birthdays, met my nephew, and watched my parents grow old all because of her." He turned toward Amelia. "You didn't fail me, not for 1 second." And just like that, the silence cracked. The first man stepped forward, a senior chief named Rowe, with 5 tours and a limp that never healed right. He nodded, no words, just respect. Then another, and another. Within moments, it wasn't a ring of SEALs anymore. It was a line, men stepping up one by one, offering nothing more than a hand on her shoulder or a nod that said, "We were wrong." She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just stood there and absorbed it like armor being reforged with every touch. Then Master Chief Donovan Hale stepped beside her, a man known more for his brutal honesty than his sentiment. He held her rank bars in one palm. "I've trained thousands of warriors," he said, voice heavy. "But what I saw today wasn't just skill, it was legacy, it was control, and it was the kind of damn precision that changes the standard." He offered the bars, but Amelia didn't take them yet. Instead, she looked around, not just at the men, but at what came next. She knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something harder. Because now, she wasn't just the woman who stood back up. She was the symbol of everything they didn't want to admit. That competence has no gender. That pain doesn't discriminate. And that skill under fire is louder than every opinion whispered behind your back. Amelia turned to face the crowd. "I'm not asking for your respect," she said. "I already earned it." Then she reached for the bars, clipped them back to her collar, and the first clap broke through the air like a crack. Then another, and another, until 147 Navy SEALs were applauding not politely, but completely, because they hadn't just seen a woman fight. They'd seen a warrior redefine what it meant to kneel, and what it meant to stand back up. The room was small, windowless, and smelled like scorched coffee and dust. Captain Amelia Cross sat at one end of a steel table. Her ribs were wrapped, her lips split again from a smile she hadn't meant to make. Across from her, Master Chief Donovan Hale flipped through a thick folder without saying a word. The silence stretched. It wasn't tension, it was calculation. She recognized it now. That's what Hale did, he measured people, not with words, but with pressure. And Amelia had passed every pressure test he could throw at her. Finally, he closed the folder. "Do you know what the brass saw today?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the folder still under his palm. They saw proof that integration isn't theory, that a woman, outnumbered and targeted, could not only hold the line but set a new one. He paused, like he was waiting for that to land. "So now they want more." Amelia blinked. More of what? He slid the folder toward her. Inside were 20 names. Female medics, different branches, different ranks, all volunteers, all transferred from units where they'd been ignored, dismissed, or quietly pushed aside. He tapped the top page. "They're building something. Amelia, a program, a real one, combat medicine integration, and they want you to run it." She stared at the names. Jessica Hartley, Kimberly Vaughn, Alexis Brenner. Each name carried with it a note in the margins. Dismissed from SO pipeline, no justification. Filed harassment complaint, no action taken. Fitness scores above standard still failed. They weren't just names, they were stories. Stories like hers. "Why me?" she asked. Hale shrugged, like it was obvious. "Because you bled for it. Because you broke 2 SEALs and then patched them up without blinking. Because when 147 men wanted to hate you, you made them listen." She closed the folder slowly. Her hands were still shaking. "I didn't ask to become a symbol," she said softly. "Symbols don't ask," Hale replied. "They rise or they don't." He stood, walked to the far wall, and pulled down a worn combat knife in a shadow box frame. The blade was pitted, handle smooth from decades of use. "This knife belonged to my CO in Somalia. He gave it to me after I made my first impossible call. Told me, we carry legacy or we get crushed by it." He handed it to her. "Now I'm giving it to you." She hesitated. "I don't deserve." "Don't finish that sentence," his voice cut across the room. "You stood in a ring and taught nearly 150 men that skill doesn't care who wields it, and now you're going to teach 20 women how to do the same." Amelia held the knife in her hand. It was heavier than she expected, not in weight and meaning. 6 weeks. That's how long she had to build the program, to train them, to prepare them. Not just to heal, but to survive. Because combat medicine wasn't about bandages and morphine. It was about crawling through gunfire with someone else's blood in your hands and still having the clarity to choose the wound that mattered most. "What happens if I fail?" she asked. Hale didn't blink. "Then someone else takes your place, and those 20 women go back to being too weak, too soft, or too pretty to fight." He paused. "But I don't think you will, because you've already shown them the most important thing. You didn't win because you're stronger. You won because you were prepared." Amelia didn't respond right away. She opened the folder again, ran her fingers over the names. Each one was a promise, a second chance, a burden, a fire. She looked up. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Hale confirmed, and the first thing you teach them, he tapped the knife still in her hand, is what it means to carry weight. 6 weeks went by faster than combat. Captain Amelia Cross stood alone in the center of a freshly painted training ring, same dimensions, same white lines, but everything else had changed. The old ring had been for testing her. This one, it was for building them. 20 women stood around the circle, boots polished, faces tense, all wearing standard-issue fatigues without rank displayed. They were from different branches: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, different ages, different scars. But all of them had something to prove. Amelia didn't introduce herself. She walked the ring once in silence, her boots tapping across the concrete like a metronome. Then she stopped. "You're not here because someone believes in you." The words were brutal. "You're here because someone somewhere wants to see you fail, and they're watching." No one moved. Amelia continued. "Every time you speak up in a briefing, someone will question your intelligence. Every time you raise your weapon, someone will measure your hands. Every time you kneel beside a wounded soldier, someone will wonder if you can lift his weight. And if you hesitate, if you flinch, they'll say they were right." Silence. She stepped to the center of the ring. "So we're going to take that hesitation and kill it." That was day 1. By day 10, they were bruised and exhausted. By week 3, they were sharp and angry. And by the beginning of week 5, something shifted. Jessica Hartley, who had flinched every time a man raised his voice, took down a 210-pound male instructor in under 5 seconds during a full-speed scenario. Kimberly Vaughn, once told she couldn't handle the physical demands, carried a simulated casualty across a 60-yard field in under 90 seconds. They didn't smile when they succeeded. They didn't ask for praise, because Amelia hadn't trained them for applause. She'd trained them to survive the silence that follows doubt. One night, late far after lights out, Amelia sat alone in her office, reviewing field reports. Her ribs still ached when she moved too fast, a quiet reminder of the kick Mason Tate had landed 2 months ago. She kept the rank bars he'd tried to knock off her collar in her drawer, right beside Hale's combat knife. A knock came at the door. Jessica stepped inside, sweat still drying on her brow. "Ma'am," she said, her voice more confident now, but tight. "Request permission to speak." Amelia nodded. "What's on your mind?" Jessica hesitated, then said it. "I don't think I'm scared anymore." Amelia leaned back slowly. "You'll still be scared. The fear just learns how to hide. What matters is what you do when it shows up." Jessica looked down at her hands, calloused now, bruised, stronger. "I thought we came here to learn how to fight back," she said quietly. "But you were teaching us how to stop apologizing." Amelia exhaled. Finally, someone had said it out loud. "Good," she replied, "because no one is going to hand you credibility. You'll take it, with consistency, with clarity, with force. When force is required." Jessica nodded, then added, almost whispering, "Thank you for not softening this." Amelia didn't respond. She didn't need to, because that was growth, not just in the student, but in the teacher. She had come into this thinking her job was to prove integration worked, but now she knew. Her real job was to create women who never had to prove it again. It was raining the morning of graduation. Not a storm, just that California mist that clung to skin like memory. The flag flapped half-heartedly on its pole, concrete slick with drizzle, the kind of day that felt like it was holding its breath. 20 women stood in formation. No medals yet, no speeches, just tired eyes, battle-tested bodies, and a silence so deep it echoed. Captain Amelia Cross stood in front of them, hands behind her back, boots planted in the same ring where she'd once bled, and stood alone. Only now, she wasn't alone anymore. Behind her, lining the perimeter in loose formation, were men. Not just any men, the same SEALs who had once watched her fall. Now they stood in silence. Out of respect. Out of something more The ceremony was private, no press, no cameras, just truth, witnessed. Master Chief Donovan Hale stepped forward with a clipboard. He didn't smile, didn't deliver a speech. He simply nodded once at Amelia, then turned to the 20 women and spoke like a man delivering orders. You're not here because someone gave you a chance. You're here because you earned it. He paused. From this day forward, you are Combat Medic Integration Class 1, and your performance will set the standard. Then he stepped back, and Amelia stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. You've trained under pressure most people will never understand. You've been bruised, broken, doubted, and ignored, but you didn't fold. You sharpened. Her gaze swept across their faces. I want you to remember the first time someone looked at you and said, "You don't belong here." Not out of bitterness, but as a promise to yourself that no one ever gets to say it again. Some of the women were crying now, not loudly, just quiet tears for battles that no one else had seen. She continued, You're not symbols. You're not exceptions. You are the new rule. Behind her, Hale raised a hand, and one by one the SEALs began to clap. Not polite claps, not obligatory. This was thunder, earned thunder, from men who had once stood with arms crossed, who had doubted, who had waited for these women to fail. And instead, they watched them rise. Later that afternoon, Amelia stood alone in her office. The room was quiet except for the sound of waves outside and the faint creak of a ceiling vent. She poured 2 glasses of bourbon. One she placed across from her on the desk. The other she held in her hand. Across the room, mounted on the wall, were 2 knives. One belonged to Donovan Hale. The other had been sent 2 days earlier in a weathered wooden box. It was engraved with the initials M.A. Captain Maggie Ashford. A woman Amelia had never met, a name she'd only heard whispered in legacy. The first female logistics officer to lead a convoy through Desert Storm under live fire. Inside the box was a note written in pen, short, sharp, final. Pass it forward. They're not ready for you. That's why you're perfect. Amelia looked at the bourbon glass across from her. Then she whispered, "Thank you," and drank. The sun was beginning to set as she stepped outside. She walked past the training ring where 20 women had just finished rewriting history. Walked past the buildings that used to house doubt, now repurposed for instruction. Walked past a line of male trainees whispering the name Cross with something that wasn't fear, but respect. Because legends aren't born in spotlight. They're forged in silence, in sweat, in failure, in 7 seconds that change everything. And Captain Amelia Cross had done it. She had kneeled. She had risen. And now, she had replaced the standard. There will come a moment when the world tells you to kneel. Not literally, but in words, in silence, in side glances that say you don't belong here. In that moment, you will feel the weight of every expectation stacked against you. You'll hear the doubt before you even act. And that's when you must decide, will I shrink or will I rise? Captain Amelia Cross didn't rise because she was fearless. She rose because she was prepared. She rose because she knew that competence doesn't need permission. And she rose not just for herself, but for the women who would come after her. So they wouldn't have to. The greatest strength isn't in proving others wrong, it's in becoming so undeniably excellent that they no longer matter. Because once you stand back up, they won't remember who doubted you, only who couldn't stop you. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell. More powerful stories are coming. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.